Today we'll be discussing about induction type single phase energy meters. Induction type single phase energy meters. Now first of all, what is an energy meter? एनर्जी मीटर क्या होता है और वो किस काम आता है? एनर्जी मीटर measures the amount of energy in watt hours. Energy in watt hours means power multiplied by time. Power in watts multiplied by time in minutes. Hours. So this can also be called as watt hour meter, or the energy meter can also be called as the watt hour meter. The induction type energy meter consists of 4 constructional parts. The first part of energy meter is driving system. The next one is the moving system. Third one is braking system, and fourth and the last one is registering system. Now before we start narrating about each system, let us have a look at the diagram of the energy meter, what it appears, what it looks like, and what are the basic parts of its constructional features that can easily be seen through a diagram only. Now this represents the schematic diagram of the watt hour meter. Here we can easily see the different parts of the energy meter. The first one is the AC supply. The second one is the load, and the constructional parts of this energy meter consist of the pressure coil or the voltage coil, and the shunt magnet. The pressure coil is associated with the shunt magnet. This is the shunt magnet. You can see this. This is actually the shunt magnet. And at the middle limb of this shunt magnet, a winding is present which is called as pressure coil or the voltage coil. Now corresponding to this shunt magnet, we have a series magnet also. This magnet, which is in alignment with this shunt magnet, is called as series magnet. And the winding on this magnet, you can see the coils on this magnet. The coils on this magnet are called as current coils or series coils. The other part of which you can see in the diagram is this part. This is nothing else but the aluminium disc which rotates. Aluminium disc for rotation. and this is the moving system of this energy meter. The other part you can see is the braking magnet. Braking magnet, what is its function? It helps in controlling the speed of the disc, controlling the speed of this aluminum disc. Now, one more important constructional part of the energy meter are the bands. You can see the bands, the blue bands you can see. These are the blue bands, and they are referred to as the copper shading bands. Copper shading bands. Now each part of the energy meter has a unique function to play. Each part has a unique function to play. The first part, which is the shunt magnet, this receives the pressure coil. This receives the pressure coil or the voltage coil. Now why it is called as the voltage coil? Voltage coil क्यों कहलाता है? What is the reason behind it being called the voltage coil? Is that this coil is in parallel with the load. The voltage coil is in parallel with the load, and it supplies the voltage component. It supplies the voltage component of the load to the energy meter. It supplies the voltage component of the load to the energy meter. Now, from where does the current component come from? From where does the current component of the energy meter come from? This comes from the series magnet coil or the current coil. This is the series magnet. This is the series magnet, and the coil wound over it is called the series coil or the current coil. And why it is called the series coil or the current coil? Because it is in series with the load. It is in series with the load. You can see it here. From this point to this point to this point to this point. This entire thing is in series with the load. This entire thing is in series with the load. Now, इन सभी चीज़ों के अलावा एक और इम्पॉर्टेंट चीज़ होती है. There is one more important thing after all these things, and that is the recording mechanism. It is the recording mechanism. This unit, all these parts or all these units actually measure the energy. These parts are so constituted so that they measure the actual energy being used by the load. But how do we come to know, or what is the method to display this energy? What is the method to display this quantity of energy which is being measured. This is done through the recording mechanism. This is done through the recording mechanism. The recording mechanism is placed in linear position with the shaft. The recording mechanism is placed linearly with the shaft of the measuring instrument, so that whenever there is a motion in the disc, you can easily get the motion which converts the motion into energy, the motion of the disc into corresponding amount of energy, and it displays the amount of energy being used by the load. So these were all the constructional details of your watt-hour meter, the different parts of it, and a very brief working, not exactly the working, but working in parts of the energy meter. Now let us go into the deep and detailed analysis of each part. So the first one was the driving system. The first part, it has 4 parts, we have already told. And the first part is the driving system. So the driving system consists of two electromagnets, as I have already told. Two electromagnets. The first one is this electromagnet, the other one is this electromagnet. So the driving system consists of two electromagnets. One is called the series magnet and the other is called the shunt magnet. There is a winding present on the shunt magnet on the middle limb. Shunt magnet can also be called as the pressure coil magnet or the voltage coil magnet. And one most important thing about the voltage coil is that it has to be made as much inductive as possible, or rather highly inductive. It has to be made highly inductive in nature. So, and the driving system also, the copper shading rings which were shown in the blue color in the diagram constitutes one of the parts of the driving system. And what is the function of this copper shading ring? The main function of the copper shading ring is to make the phase angle displacement between the magnetic field set up by the shunt magnet and the supply voltage. To make the phase angle displacement between the magnetic field set up by the shunt magnet and supply voltage approximately equal to 90 degrees. This is the main function of the copper shading ring. Copper shading rings are also sometimes referred to as the power factor compensator or the compensating loop. You can also call them as power factor compensator or power compensating loop. Now we have already discussed about the series magnet and the current coil. Also I have told that the series magnet carries the load current and produces the flux in proportion to the magnitude of the load current. Now the other part of the moving system, first one was the driving system, the next one is the moving system. The other part is moving system. The aluminum disc mounted on the vertical spindle or the shaft, aluminum disc which is mounted on the vertical spindle or the shaft constitutes the moving system. The shaft that supports the aluminum disc is connected by a gear arrangement to clock mechanism on front of the meter to provide information that consumed energy by the load. Now there is a time variation between the fluxes produced by shunt magnet and the series magnet, and both these fluxes induce the eddy currents in the aluminum disc, and the eddy currents induced by the first flux couples with the current of the second flux and produces the force, and the flux of the second flux interacts with the current of the first one to produce another force. So these two forces act on the disc and produce motion. The third part of the energy meter is braking system. Braking system, I have already told, it is a permanent magnet located diametrically opposite to the AC magnets. The disc passes between the magnet gaps. The movement of the rotating disc through the magnetic field crossing the air gap sets up the eddy currents in the disc. What does that mean? जो परमानेंट मैग्नेट होता है वो एडी करंट्स को प्रोड्यूस करता है, और ये एडी करंट रिएक्ट करते हैं मैग्नेटिक फील्ड के साथ, एंड दे एक्सर्ट अ ब्रेकिंग टॉर्क on the moving system. Now by changing the position of the brake magnet, the speed of the rotating disc can be easily controlled. The next part and the last part is the registering system or the registering mechanism. What is the function of the registering mechanism? First of all, it consists of gear trains driven either by the worm or the pinion gear or the disc shaft. And it turns the pointers that indicate the energy being measured. Energy meter adds up, or it integrates all the instantaneous power values. So that the total energy being measured is easily known, and that is why it is also given the name integrating meter. Now the working of the energy meter consists of two basic mechanisms. First one is the motion of the aluminum disc, and the second one is the counting and the displaying mechanism of the amount of energy transferred. Now we will be discussing about the first mechanism first. Mechanism of the rotation of the aluminum disc. For this, let us move to the first slide. Now let us try to understand what actually happens in the energy meter behind motion of the disc and behind conversion of motion of disc into exact values of the energy being measured. Now I have already told that the shunt magnet or the pressure coil carries the voltage of the load, while the series magnet or the series coil or the current coil carries the current in the load. Now this voltage coil, it produces a field. It produces a field or the flux, and this series coil also produces a flux. Now, because of the presence of this copper shading band, because of the presence of the copper shading band, because of the presence of the copper shading band, there is a difference of, or there is a lag of 90 degrees between the voltages. Now, the eddy currents produced on the disc, because of the voltage coil flux, the eddy currents produced on the disc because of the voltage coil interact with the flux of the series magnet coils. I'll repeat it. The eddy currents produced by the pressure coil interacts with the flux of the series magnet coil, and the flux of the series magnet interacts with the eddy currents produced by the shunt magnet coils. I'll repeat it once again. The eddy currents produced by the series magnet coils interact with the flux produced by the pressure magnet coils. So there are two forces, or the two torques, acting simultaneously on the disc. Two forces or two torques acting simultaneously on the disc, and one opposes the other. So there is net force developed on the disc in one direction, and this force or this torque produces motion in this disc. Now this motion is transferred to the recording mechanism. So this was the basic principle behind the working of the energy meter. The basic principle, the basic fundamental about how energy meter works. Now we'll be moving on to the next slide, which is mechanism of display of the amount of energy. Now the motion of the disc is transferred by shaft to the resisting mechanism. and the registering mechanism consists of series of dials which record the amount of energy being used by the load. So finally we get on the display is the amount of energy which is consumed by the load. So this was all about the energy meter and its working. Thank you everyone.